I think that before my dad was diagnosed with ALS, we were a typical, normal family.
I used to love to read all the news articles of my dad and the success he had in sports, and then I saw all those things taken from him slowly, over time.
And yet, I don't think we would have the amazing joy that we have today without having been stripped of everything that we thought was important in life. I don't think when we were first married we thought of any challenges at all. We were just kind of deliriously happy. Our vows were very important. We thought about in sickness and in health till death do us part. But never to this degree did we even fathom what could come our way.
When I think about Charlie as a football player, unbelievable. 170 pounds, about 5'9". But in terms of his abilities, he was a monster.
We played varsity football together, varsity basketball, and varsity baseball. So 3 sports, 6 teams over a 2-year period. You know, I've seen a lot of phenomenal athletes come out of this state, and without question, Charlie was the best athlete that I'd ever seen. He was the most natural athlete.
We played Kamehameha schools for the championship, and there were 25,000 people in the stadium for a high school football game, and Charlie led us to a 20-6 victory, which is just one of my great memories.
Everybody thinks of Charlie as a football player. I try to get them to realize he was equally as good in basketball. But we played a game at Kamehameha senior year. The most unbelievable game that I have ever coached.
Wiedemeyer scores on a driving layup. Wiedemeyer has scored 13 points in this quarter.
It was the greatest individual performance I've ever seen in my life.
He was a black belt, and this is in high school, and so he was not a guy to mess around with. But he wouldn't go around bragging what a great guy he was, how tough he was, and what a great athlete he was. He was a very quiet guy, actually, and very humble. So, you know, everything that he did in that manner. So that's why he was so well respected by everyone.
I was one of the rogues in high school, and a number of us would sit on a bench under a tree and watch the world go by, because it was a very strategically located place to sit. And I noticed Charlie coming down from the cafeteria after lunch one day with this absolutely gorgeous blonde, and it was Lucy.
Well, you know, it was like a match made in heaven. I mean, here the best athlete in the school is going with the prettiest girl in the school, and it was like bulletin board material, picture. You know, this is what goes on the marquee in America. That, you know, this is the way things should have been. You know, and as it turned out, it's the way it was.
I used to call him Mr. Perfect. Everything Charlie did was perfect. He combed his hair perfectly, wore his clothes perfectly. He had a way of doing everything just right. He was a tremendously talented athlete, and he garnered a lot of publicity. He became a legend in high school.
We were very young. We were still at Michigan State, and terribly naive about what our future could bring. Well, being from Hawaii and living in Michigan was quite an amazing difference. But we saw it as an adventure, short term, and the football was awesome. In the early years, Charlie was an active athlete, and as he began his teaching and coaching career, I was always there, every game, and time with our children. They were there every game, so we always did everything as a family.
We lived in a little house. My dad had a job teaching, and my mom stayed home with the kids, and we kind of just did normal family things.
During Charlie's first year as head coach at Los Gatos High School, he noticed a progressive weakness in his right hand. He thought it might be arthritis or the result of an old football injury.
Charlie was a math teacher at the time.
And he was having trouble holding chalk in the classroom and holding on to things. And he couldn't understand why his hands were causing so many problems for him.
And at first he supported his right hand, and then when that was no longer possible, he would use his left hand. And
the middle of the 1978 season, Lucy came and talked to us and said, you know, the tests had come back, and Dr. Griffin had sat down and talked with Charlie, and that it looked like he had the early beginnings of ALS, which is more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease.
ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is a degenerative nerve disorder for which there is no known cause or cure. Eventually, Charlie's body would lose the ability to control all voluntary muscles. He would become unable to walk, talk, lift his hand, or swallow.
We didn't really know what ALS was, nor that it was actually terminal. When we looked it up and found out about the whole story about Lou Gehrig, we just figured, oh, that's Hollywood. And in the beginning, I think we chose to kind of ignore it. I mean, Charlie still looked very healthy. There was nothing that would indicate that he was going to die.
We sat and talked with Frank Griffin, who was the team doctor at the time, an orthopedic surgeon. And I remember Frank saying, this is probably a 2-year maximum life expectancy. The original diagnosis is 2 years.
Well, Cully and I were 9 and 6 when my dad was diagnosed. Someone had given my family their condo up at the Snow, and we went up, and I remember my parents talking about it, and that was the first time that I really heard details and got a sense of something is wrong.
And so I think intuitively as a child you notice things that maybe your parents don't know that you've noticed. And so I knew that he needed help, and I knew he'd probably continue to get weaker, but I didn't understand the gravity of the situation.
Because the illness progressed slowly, and I was so young, my brother was so young, I don't think we really had a sense of the enormity of this diagnosis at the time.
And it was very hard because we didn't talk to the children about what was going on. I don't know why. They could see what was going on and feel it. We didn't know how, and now we counsel families on how to talk to their children, because young ones are very perceptive.
Whether it was early on he was still able to throw the football to me, later on it was in the pool and helping him do range of motion exercises. I think for me it was just time spent with Dad no matter what we were doing.
It was kind of a day-to-day adjustment. Things like eventually we moved the dishes in the kitchen down from the upper cabinets to the lower cabinets because he couldn't raise his hands.
Whether it was getting the keys to open the car door, shift the gears on his car when he was driving and I was sitting in the passenger seat. So I think, as far as I can remember, just helping him with little things, and then those things became a little bit bigger over time.
We really took on this as a challenge, as a team, as our fight against the ravages of this illness. We didn't know that much about it, and yet we were determined not to let it get us.
My dad can explain things like no one else, and you will continue to practice them, and you will continue to work on them until you get it right. Quote, one more was is a famous quote that many players still remember, or one more time. So he, even in practice, from a golf cart, they'd run a certain play, and he'd say no, the right guard needs to take a step to the right, and they would do it again, and he'd say, good, now do it again. Good, that's how you do it one more time. So that was a theme not only for my sister and I growing up, but also for his players.
So after watching him go from, you know, this all-American guy who was just, again, the toughest individual I think I've ever seen, to a man who, you know, first he lost feeling in his arms, and so he'd walk with his hands folded because he couldn't move them, but he would be able to walk and shuffle, and then, you know, he wasn't able to do any of that. So it was really tough for me to see him.
As my dad's condition progressed and he needed more and more help from my mom, she was amazingly strong. And what I mean by that is not only physically in helping him, in feeding him, or in helping him walk or get in and out of the car, but she was also emotionally very strong.
The way she handled it was just incredible. I mean, sleepless nights and exhaustion and, you know, suddenly having to pay the bills and get a job and support the family and deal with, you know, all the details of my dad's progression.
The hardest was when Charlie lost the ability to speak, and yet he was still determined.
So it was a lot more time consuming. We ended up coming up with a set of signals, whereas Lucy would read Charlie's lips.
What Charlie does is he tells me, and I read his lips, and then I have a headset on, and I convey that to Charlie's assistant, Butch Catalico, and then he signals in the play on the sidelines.
It was a process that took a little bit of time to perfect, but I think we got it down to where we were doing pretty well. And I think Lucy was amazing.
And so far I haven't been fired this year.
We were just going to push on as long as possible. The biggest impact came when the two of us ran out of steam, when the struggle was so overwhelming and Charlie was obviously not going to make it.
And you'd hear my dad choking in the middle of the night, and you know, you'd get up and she was by his side.
We had a little system that we did to try to help him stop choking, and those were always very scary moments because he couldn't breathe.
Without looking at you, she'd say, hot water, and I need this, and I need that, and she'd calm my dad down because he was anxious because he couldn't breathe, and we'd get through it.
When I saw the physical and the emotional struggle that my family was going through, I told my wife that maybe you and the children would be better off without me. And I just said, we'd much rather have you like this than not at all. And that gave you the determination to keep going.
And I got to tell you that God's grace was certainly upon our family, because it seemed at that point in time, He started sending a number of Christians into our family. Every nurse that came to work with us seemed to be a Christian and would want to share their faith. And we started having friends that we hadn't seen in years who had become Christians and wanted to share their faith. And so seeds were planted and watered.
In 1985, when Charlie was barely alive, in fact, they weren't sure he was going to even make it through the night. Every hour seemed to be possibly the last. And we had a new nurse come in that evening, and she shared with us about the importance of our faith and having a strong foundation. And we made a commitment that night, the two of us, a strong one, not knowing whether Charlie was going to even be alive the next morning.
Always being able to take care of himself, his family, and kind of get the job done, and suddenly losing all the ability to do all the things that make you a man, make you who you are, I think he came to the end of himself.
I think my dad's will at that point was finally broken. The last string that was hanging on, that was that last string of stubbornness, and it broke. And he let God come into his life. And so he gave his life to Christ, and my mom did that same day as well.
And we had our own little miracle that night.
Didn't mean all the problems would go away, certainly, but what it did mean is that they didn't have to rely on their own strength anymore. And God continued to work in their life. They began sharing their story with others. We were praying for my sister, who was not yet a Christian.
In spite of all the overwhelming situations that my parents were facing, they really made all efforts to love me unconditionally. And I was singing in bands at the time. I was singing in biker bars, and my parents would come and they'd sit in the back and they'd clap and encourage me in that, and it just spoke volumes to me, and they just loved me unconditionally into the kingdom eventually.
In the summer of 1985, Charlie was fighting for every breath and was again near death. He and Lucy decided that a ventilator and feeding tube were the best option. His health immediately improved.
All this equipment was now necessary. The ventilator brought in a whole new realm of caregiving, of concerns.
It was difficult for my dad to accept help from others. He was very proud, and still is very proud. And I think in our family and maybe in our community, we try and do things on our own without bothering other people.
When we began to need help, and our community came around us phenomenally and brought in help and had fundraisers, and that was hard because it's very embarrassing to really ask for help, to sort of feel so stripped of your ability to do things and your ability to take care of your family.
I think my dad finally was able to let go and say, you know what, I probably could use some help. And I think initially that was very hard for him, but I think after a while he realized that he needed it, and that help from others was good. It was good for him, for us, and also for those who wanted to help.
But I'll tell you, renewing our faith gave Charlie such a new lease on life.
This is the biggest game ever in the history of Los Gatos High School.
The inside handoff to Wall. He's got the first down, might score. It's St. Francis 6 and the Wildcats nothing. Andriani's kickoff is very low. And the hole opens up on the far side at the 40 to the 45-50 and down there. Third down short, far hash mark 6-yard line. Sam Levitt's the quarterback. Borghese near side. That's touchdown. And Borghese scores. We're tied at 6.
The game came down to the last minute, and they lined up to kick a winning field goal. We blocked the kick and won the game 14-12. It was an unbelievable atmosphere at the end of the game. You know, Charlie and Lucy were out on the field, and the accolades that the stadium and the stands were chanting his name. I don't think as many football games as I've coached since or before then I've ever quite had the feeling that I had at the end of that game.
That's like out of a movie or something.
Yeah, you could see the smile on Charlie Wiedemeyer's face.
Yeah, you sure could.
You know, a lot of people have said, you know, how could God allow this? And yet, I don't think we would have the amazing joy that we have today without having been stripped of everything that we thought was important in life, and gaining a perspective.
We had a first-hand look at our parents' journey, and that is that they had the American dream. You know, they had a home, job, lived in a wonderful community, we had family, and then I saw all those things taken from him slowly, over time. And to see their commitment to each other during the struggle, to see my dad fight with his own strength, And to know that he was a strong person, knowing his history as an athlete, knowing him as my dad, the strength that he had, and yet that wasn't enough to overcome this disease. And then to finally see him give his life over to Christ, and to see the amount of strength, and how my dad's own strength, or my mom's own strength, or our family strength paled in comparison to what God brought, I think really solidified a faith in us that's unwavering.
Without his wife, he couldn't have done this. Without Lucy.
One of the great love stories, because of Charlie's disease and overcoming his challenges and living with his challenges, I think the real story is the love and devotion of Lucy, and both of them to their relationship. The great saint in this whole process is Lucy.
That's an amazing relationship between Lucy and Charlie. And I think that relationship has grown stronger and stronger because of her commitment to him and his commitment to her, and their commitment to the Lord.
You know, to go through all this, you have to have some kind of stability. You have to have some kind of faith in something, and their faith was in the Lord, and this is what got them through all this. They couldn't have done it without that faith.
It's not about the football. Charlie was a great football coach, but the story of Charlie and Lucy and their ability to survive a terrible disease has been incredible. The one comment I always remember them saying is, well, if you don't know what to do, it's better to laugh and smile about it.
Humor plays an immense role. In the beginning, we kind of lost our sense of humor. And I think it was our son who really brought us back. He has a marvelous sense of humor.
Humor and laughter are a huge part of our entire family, and I think it's a part of the Hawaiian culture. Always laughing, always telling jokes. There's a lot of teasing that goes on in our family, and I think that helped a lot, especially in times of frustration. Someone was always quick to make a joke or quick to make light of the situation, and that always eased tensions, and I think it helped you focus on what was important in life. The important thing was not that I can't get my pant leg on and I've fallen and almost hurt myself. The importance was, you're here to help me, we're here together, and we're going to go somewhere, and I'd rather go out with my pants on than no pants at all.
And the more we go out and speak and share, oh my goodness, the stories. People call us with no physical dilemma, but a lot of emotional issues, a lot of anger, and so Charlie invites them over. And when they see his limitations and yet the joy in his face and how much he loves to tease everybody, they go away with a whole new perspective and a realization of the preciousness of every single day. We don't appreciate all that we have until we lose it. I think that one of the most important things that we've discovered is a loving relationship is an ongoing project, whether it's with each other, with your children, with your friends, but especially with the Lord. And it just is magnified when you have an illness or a disease, or sometimes even it's an elderly parent that you're caring for, or a child that has challenges. And everybody has them. Some respond well to amazing, huge challenges, and some do not. And we can't fault or judge them. We can just share what we know, and that is that, you know, God has a plan and a purpose for each one of us.
God really did have a plan, and we didn't see the plan. We didn't know that my dad and my mom were going to be in a documentary, that they were going to tell people about their lives, their story, how God had touched them, and that it would touch other people's lives, that it would encourage people with ALS or other debilitating conditions, that it would encourage families who were having a difficult time no matter what the circumstances.
I think it's really simple. I think it is commitment. commitment to the Lord, commitment to each other, commitment to their family, commitment to their word.
Tangible. He's really there. It's not a story. There's not a question of does God really exist. I mean, he really took care of things, and he always came through. I don't know how many people feel that way, but we certainly do. We certainly do.
Oh, he says, I think it's important that people understand the love of God for everyone. And that love is an unconditional love. So even when we're not especially attractive, or we've stumbled, or we've not lived up to our own expectations, that the loving God is still there. That unconditional love is something that once you understand it and recognize it, it allows you to give grace on a daily basis, especially to each other. Right?
And that no matter how much time we have here on earth, eternal life really is forever, and it's really with God.